Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Today we, inshallah, are going to be covering a beautiful recap of what we have been going through for the past, I would say, 9-10 weeks. But alhamdulillah, before I do begin on that recap in itself, I want us to always go back to this dunya and how this dunya, as we go through the journeys in life, really, truly, when we think of something that is hard, when we think of something that is difficult, it actually is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is easing our life as we go through each stage. And what I mean by that is that the hardship is actually not a hardship because of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. The hardship comes into play when we forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we are not reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we're not cognizant and aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we are going through life struggles. So subhanallah, as always, I always like to give this introduction that when we call the series A Beautiful Life, it will always be a reminder for us that this life, this dunya, it cannot be beautiful in terms of everything aligned and perfect the way we expect it to be. The beautiful life will always be a life that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is when you feel a sense of satisfaction, a sense of contentment, a sense of sakina, that peace that we're all searching for, right? And subhanallah, through a beautiful life and knowing that you will have to face those struggles, but those aren't exactly like the hardship that really makes you feel like, what's the point? Because you know at the end of the day, the point is what? To be in Jannah, but not just that, to what? Get the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are various levels of that in itself. And so that being said, the question then lies, well, how do I navigate or connect myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because of course we usually say, read Quran, pray your salah, do your adhkar. But how am I actually feeling where my heart is also inclined in this? And that is through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is through not only knowing what those names are through a list of like, okay, these are Asma al-Husna, right? And going down the list of those names. No, it is internalizing it. It is seeing everything in terms of this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is behind this. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is in control. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that placed this in my life for some sort of wisdom, some sort of hikmah that I don't understand. My knowledge is limited, but I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed it. So in every thought process that you have, you bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into that. That being said, alhamdulillah, we have been going over the name of Allah Ar-Rabb. Ar-Rabb, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is nurturing us, the one that is helping us grow, the one that is taking us stage by stage, step by step through everything in our lives, that without that tarbiyah, without that growth, we would not be where we are right now. And that reality and that reminder is where we have to think of when I say, what does Ar-Rabb mean? It's not only just one definition. A lot of the times when we think of one name of Allah, we also think of what is the definition of it, right? Like an immediate definition. But Ar-Rabb has multiple meanings to it. So we're going to quickly recap, inshallah, what those meanings are. We've actually covered this before, but now, alhamdulillah, you will see it on the screen, that when we're saying that Allah huwa ar-Rabb, Allah is my Rabb, what does Rabb mean? It means, number one, the nurturer. You'll see 10 definitions over here, and even that, there's so much more. But what are these? Number one, the nurturer, as we talked about. The meaning of a Rabb, the one that nurtures someone, right? And Who is nurturing us? We know Allah is. How does Allah nurture you? Nurturing will not come when things are easy. Nurturing takes place when you need to grow. And that's how you get nourished, right? That nourishment that we're looking for, that growth that we're looking for, where our heart feels at ease, where our heart is yearning for Allah. Our heart is yearning to seek the pleasure of Allah. How does that take place? You're nourishing it. And we'll go into a little bit about nourishing as well, inshallah. Then, the next definition, reforming. When you think of a reformer, you're thinking of something that is helping you be a better individual. You want to reform yourself, right? You want to work on yourself. Well, how do you do that? You can't work on yourself. Think about it. And we've talked about this before as well, when we were in school and we would get our grades, our progress report, our report cards, right? And they would say that, okay, needs improvement, right? Is doing wonderfully in terms of effort, but needs to work on this and this area. So what are you doing? You're reforming yourself. You're becoming better so that the next year you are now at another level, right? If you think back of when we started writing, right? I'm sure like a lot of moms, your moms might have even kept what you first started writing, like how you first started writing your ABCs, right? And that's like probably saved somewhere, perhaps. I know I did that with my kids, right? So I was, I was looking at how my first daughter, how she started writing her ABCs, and I was like, that's really bad. But then practice, improvement, and she's reforming herself in terms of that. We reform ourselves on a regular basis. We just don't realize that that's what we're doing. So another name of when we say Ar-Rabb, we mean the one that is reforming us. Then we go into master, as-Sayyid. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls himself Ar-Rabb means that he is the master of everything. He and master and owner, we put them together because we know that if you're a master, you're also an owner, right? Like you own something, right? When we say, like, for example, and we use this like master and with his slaves, right? You're the owner. You have control. You have the authority. You have the power at the end of the day. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reminding ourselves that when we use Ar-Rabb, this is what you're thinking about, that Allah has the power. Allah has the control. Allah is the ultimate owner of this situation and how it's going to play out. But now, always remember, just because, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner, the expectation on our end is not that we just sit there and say, well, Allah owns everything, so I'm just not going to do anything in life. I'm just going to wait for things to happen and play out the way it is. No, the effort will need to also come from you. You need to take the steps. And we're going to go through, inshallah, how do we take these steps? So the next definition that we had covered, which is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the disposer of the affairs. And disposer of affairs means the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you are calling on Ar-Rabb, Ya Rabb, because of the fact that you are calling on Ar-Rabb, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also then consequently brings situations to help you. And He's disposing that affair. So the relationship is not one-sided. The relationship is you take the step and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to you running. That is what we need to understand. And then the next one, taking you through stage by stage, moment by moment, week by week, day by day. Anytime that you feel your week is going really, it feels really heavy, anytime you feel like your day, maybe in the morning, you were doing all right, by the time afternoon, evening hit, it felt really, there was this heaviness. That is the moment that you ask Allah, Ya Rabb, help me get through this day. By you saying Rabb in itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to, this is what you have, this essentially what you have called upon when you say Rabb. The fact that Allah is going to take you through the stage as well. That He's going to help you through the rest of the day because you called upon His name by saying Rabb. The next one, meaning the bestower. The fact that He bestows, gives, right? When someone bestows something upon you, they're giving something, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He gives, it's not just where He's giving anything and treating you in any way. We know that His giving is generous. His giving means that it is an honor. It's an element of respect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you. That's why He gives. The next one, meaning the one who makes us upright. The one where when we say Ya Rabb, we're saying, oh Allah, help me be better. Make me upright. Allow me to go through this in the right direction. And then the last one, the fixer. When we call upon Rabb, we're asking Allah to fix the situation, to make it easy for us. And I want us to note down these definitions because when, inshallah, you open up the Quran and you see Rabb being mentioned, Rabb is mentioned at least more than 500 times in the Quran. So any surah that you open up and you read through and Rabb is noted right there, allow yourself to pause on that ayah and think about all these definitions and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this particular name and all these definitions in that ayah. Rabb consists of 2 letters, Ra and Ba. And the fact that Rabb is mentioned at least 500 times, but interestingly enough, in the Quran, it is translated as Lord. That is where we need to understand that there is depth, number one, in the Arabic language. There is a lot more depth in the Arabic language than there is in any translation that we read. And number 2 is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes Rabb over and over again, repeatedly. And it's a short name. It is nothing long. It's not Al-Muhaymin, for example, right? It's short, sweet, but at the same time, it has its own value and weight to it. And this is the hikmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, the fact that nothing is random, and these are His words that are mentioned in the Quran, and they are true. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses Rabb and mentions it in the Quran, when you think of these definitions, always remember that each definition is the truth in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the context that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this particular name. So that being said, we had previously, in the previous sessions, we've gone through how there are 2 types of nurturing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of course, when we talk about a Rabb and we're mentioning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is giving that tarbiyah, we're talking about a level of nurturing. And so there are 2 types that we know of, which is the first general, tarbiyah al-aam, and the second being al-khas, those that are special. And we talked about how tarbiyah al-aam will go into every individual in this dunya. Muslim or non-Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them the tarbiyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bestowing upon them. He is giving them, whether they are aware of it, whether they acknowledge it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them hands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them eyes, ears, food, shelter, right? And you name it. These are just examples. So we talked about how in tarbiyah al-aam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us that there are various stages it'll be through his creation, as we gave the example previously. And we're talking about humans and also animals. And so the previous examples that we had given and we covered were also including mosquitoes, right? Because mosquitoes are very small, and in our eyes, they're insignificant. They don't really have, like, for us, we're just like, oh, there's not much value to a mosquito. If anything, we don't want it to be around. But in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the example of a mosquito, and specifically the wing of a mosquito, which in our eyes is like not something that you would think an example would be given. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the mosquito wing as an example and compares it to this dunya. That's how insignificant this dunya actually is, this world in itself. And so then it brings you back to, who are you as an individual? Where is this pride and arrogance and wanting to be at the top coming from, or wanting to be recognized coming from? Because at the end of the day, you, in reality, you and I, it sounds harsh, but the reality is we are nothing. And so that tarbiyah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says al-am, it's for everyone, that everyone should realize that Allah is the one that is behind it, but people don't. So it's a reminder for all of us that we need to reflect, because reflection is the shortest way to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next part, that next stage that we went into when we went to Tarbiyah al-Am, was the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the kingship, al-Malik, right? And so we went into, for example, when we recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and in reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, after we say Alhamdulillahi Rabb al-Alameen, we say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and then what do we say? Maliki Yawmiddin. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the king, the owner of the day of resurrection, the entire dunya in itself. So that is the second stage. And then the third stage that we talked about, which is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disposes the affairs for everyone. Everyone is living their lives. Everyone has successes and achievements, but everyone also has their downfalls. Everyone goes through some pain or another. Everyone has to go through some sort of life stage where they are now revolving, they're now transitioning. And that is for the am. Am meaning anyone. So then, who comes under khas? Tarbiyah al-khas is us. Us meaning La ilaha illallah. The ones who in their hearts, not just through their tongues, but in their hearts, they say they believe in La ilaha illallah. That there is no ilah, there is no God, there is no divine being, no one except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that khas, just like we always say, we want to be from the special groups, right? You always want to be from groups of people that are respected, that are honored. And this is an honor. La ilaha illallah is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to live our lives in that manner. And so, how is Allah honoring us? Through the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His decree. Now, it may feel weird, it may sound strange, but this is where we need to understand that the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that honor that we're looking for, will not come, as we always say, in times of ease. That honor that we are going to receive will be from when it's difficult, when it's hard for you to stop yourself in that moment, but you do it. Or say, for example, something that hurts you and you don't understand the wisdom behind it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring you because through that decree, He wants you to what? Get closer to Him. He wants you to believe in your heart with full conviction that He has not let you go, that He is with you. And so because of that, that is an honor in itself. But the more we remember Allah is usually a lot less when things are going easy. It's more when those hardships come that you're starting to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're starting to pray more. And that is an honor. So through Allah's decree, through the qadr of Allah. And so we talked about previously, use that hardship to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do you do that? You submit. You submit to what is taking place. And that acceptance is not like, oh, well, this happened, so that's it, right? No, that's not the mindset. That submission is what leads you to that contentment. That whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has distributed, whatever He has placed for you is actually a gift from Allah, your Rabb. Remember what I had said. He is the disposer, the meaning of a Rabb, the disposer of the affairs. In addition, He is the one that bestows. What is He bestowing upon you? He's bestowing the fact that I'm going to increase you because you are going through this difficulty. Because He is your Rabb and He wants you to grow. He wants you to thrive. He does not want you to feel like you are so low that you only bring yourself lower and lower. That type of mindset comes from the wiswas from shaitan. That what's the point? I'm not trying hard enough anyway. I'm not that good of a Muslim. I have so many things that I still need to work on. So then what's the point of me doing it to begin with? Forget about it. No. Knowing the fact that even though this is hard for me to go through and face this, but I will get through it. I will go over this hurdle. And then the third, patience. Your patience is not through your silence. What it means is your patience is you're not actively saying that, oh, why me, why me? Instead, your patience is you admit, you recognize this is hard. Ya Allah, this is hard. Ya Allah, my heart hurts. Ya Allah, I can't stop crying. Ya Allah, I feel so angry. I feel so annoyed. I feel so frustrated. That type of feeling, those feelings in itself, absolutely valid. And you should be able to go ahead and acknowledge that and verbalize that. But the type that we're talking about in terms of complaining is, I never catch a break. I'm always getting rejected. What's wrong with me? Am I doing something wrong? So now there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of where, okay, I'm the problem over here. When no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously put you through it so you could what? Learn from it. So you could perhaps see something and say, okay, I now understand, my mind and my thought process has now changed in how to handle the situation. But that opening of an understanding will only come through the Rabb al-Alameen putting it in your heart. And that is why you call upon a Rabb. You need to be the one to call upon a Rabb in order for Him to answer you accordingly. That is one thing we need to realize. And this will make us appreciate and benefit from the hardships that we're going through. Because then at that moment, even though we're sad, even though it is so painful, but then we will also know that no, I will benefit from this. I don't see the benefit right now. I don't understand why this is happening, but I know that there is going to be something that's going to come out of this that will be far greater than I could ever imagine. Ever imagine. And that's something that I want all of us to reflect on. When we think about especially our past and certain things that we may have done out of ignorance, certain things that we perhaps knew intentionally and still did something that was against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us here, which goes to the second, acquiring knowledge. Your Rabb is honoring you. Our Rabb, my Rabb, is honoring me. Your Rabb is honoring you through acquiring that knowledge. And acquiring knowledge in general is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nurturing us, but specifically the knowledge that we're talking about is the knowledge that gets us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that makes us want to think, and that is an honor. This is an honor in itself. The awareness. And so now, when we go through this, and this is where this dua that we talked about previously, again, this is all still a recap, the dua that we had talked about previously, which is رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ. So we're using Rabb here. That's the first name of Allah we are calling upon. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا. Do not let our hearts deviate after you have guided us. This deen is our means of guidance. This religion is a means of guidance. And the scary part is the fact that you cannot guarantee that you will be on this path of guidance. You cannot say 100% with conviction that I am on, alhamdulillah, I'm rightly guided, but I will continue to be on this path. Why can't we guarantee? Because at the end of the day, we also have our flaws, we have our weaknesses, we have our nafs, and there are moments where we can go ahead and slip. And if we do not go back to Allah, and if we do not make dua to Allah, and we do not ask our reformer, remember the one who will help us improve, if we don't ask our reformer, then how are we going to improve when we do slip? Because slipping and falling into something, doing something that you essentially, even if you intentionally did it, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, come back to me. Come back to me. And that come back to me will only happen if we recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there for us. By saying, Ya Rabb, that you are the reformer, you are my nurturer, you are the one that will take me through stage by stage. Just like, subhanAllah, there are moments where when we're talking to our parents, for example, and there's certain things that, especially when there's that generation gap. So there may be things that, or it could even be that maybe even when it comes to your deen, right, your level of faith may be different than your parents. And so then in those moments where you may be having conversations and you're not seeing eye to eye, it will be frustrating. It will be hard to go ahead and have that conversation. But at the same time, you're not going to just completely turn away from them and never talk to them just because you don't agree on something. You're going to go back to them no matter what. And so, because at the end of the day, they're your family members. They're your parents. They're the ones that gave you that tarbiyah. So no matter what, and this also, subhanAllah, also goes for non-Muslim parents, right? It goes for those that at the end of the day, they're the ones that raised you. So you will go back to them. And of course, there's no example greater than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only our nurturer, but He is taking us through every stage in life, every step, every day. So we're asking Allah, do not let our hearts deviate after you have guided us. And then we're saying that, oh Allah, give me that min ladunka rahma. We need your rahma. We need your mercy. Innaka antal wahhab. Another name of Allah is being used here, al-wahhab. So we went into depth about the fact that wahhab is being used in terms of that deen is a gift. That's why it's relevant over here. The third stage that we had discussed, which is the fact that now our thought process is starting to change, right? Because the second was ilm, was the knowledge, right? You're in that stage of seeking knowledge where you're not just going to sit there now and take in knowledge and write notes and then read it, but it obviously will penetrate you somehow. You will start thinking about it. You will start now looking at certain ayahs, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up your heart into reflecting a little bit more, going into the tadabbur of that particular ayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what now? He's reforming your thoughts and ideas. And this is where we say, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي, that I am to my slave as he thinks of me. So now the reformation will obviously happen when we're talking about this particular hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We're talking about those difficult moments where instead of saying, why me? That I always get the short end of the stick, that I'm always having to go through some sort of rejection. Instead, you are now saying that no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is improving, He's helping me grow, He's helping me thrive. And when you think of Allah in that manner, which we call husn al-dhann, thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, husn, right? In a beautiful manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then thinks of you in that manner, that okay, this person is struggling, but there will be sweetness that will come out of it. There will be that beauty that will come out of it, that they will feel, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And so that's why we had covered this last ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 286, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes, this is a dua that we make. And we took this entire dua and we went into the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa was'aha. There's no burden. Nothing is forced on us. Everything is from our Rabb, because that's why we say, Rabbana la tu'akhidna. That do not allow me to forget you when I have slipped. Do not punish me for something that I made a mistake in, something that I forgot, something that I was unaware of. And you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that forgiveness. And that is where we realize that our life is according to our attitude and our thoughts, which leads us to the stage that we took previously. The gates of goodness are opened and all evil is averted. The gates, now this is the action, because from your thoughts are now going to come action. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to go ahead and open up gates of khair. You won't see it immediately, but that khair is definitely present. And it will just be a matter of time before you realize that no, all evil is actually averted in this. And that, subhanAllah, we covered Surah Yusuf, ayahs 33 to 35, when Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam was literally, there was women everywhere, and they wanted to go ahead and have relations with Prophet Yusuf. And to the point that Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he said, Rabbi sijnu ahabbu ilayya, that Ya Rabb, he called upon in desperation. He called upon Rabb specifically, knowing that only who can fix him, who can help him? Allah. And he said, I would rather be in jail than do what they invite me to. And he's saying, if you do not turn their cunning away from me, I might yield to them. I will fall into that ignorance. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded because he is Sami'un Alim. And we talked about how was his response? Jail. He was imprisoned. That despite, it says right here, despite seeing all the proofs of innocence, he was imprisoned. In our minds, imprisonment means you're doomed. This is something negative. But what category is this falling into? The gates of goodness are opened and evil is averted. So even though for someone, jail may have looked like, oh, this is something bad. But for Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, it was khair. It was the gate of goodness that opened for him, because we know that consequently what happened and the success in his life after that. Simply why? Because the evil that was right in front of him, that shar, what did he do? It was to the point where he was like, oh Allah, I will fall into this. I am very close into just falling and slipping into this, but keep me away. Protect me from this. So, who is Ar-Rabb? Let's come back to it again. The nurturer, the nourisher, the reformer, the master, the owner, taking us through stage by stage, the one who makes us upright, and the fixer. And so, subhanAllah, this dua I started off last week, and I always mention this particular dua because when we go through various stages in life, it's important for us to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this dua is Surah Al-Isra, ayah number 80, that when we go through these various tests and trials, we need to be truthful. You can go ahead and, put a front and smile in front of others. You may go ahead and lie to others that, oh, I'm very happy and this is what I'm doing. But the reality is that we need to be truthful to ourselves and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that truthfulness. That, oh Allah, وَقُرْ رَبِّ ادْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ الصِّدْقِ. That, oh Allah, whatever I'm entering into, this new job, this new position, this new home, this new friendship, oh Allah, give me that truthfulness in my heart. And what kind of truthfulness are we asking Allah? That, oh Allah, that this position, this transition, this new stage will help me get closer to you. Because obviously you're making dua to Allah. So what are you asking Allah? That, oh Allah, give me that heart of truthfulness, that sidq. And that sidq that you're asking, that truthfulness, is that, oh Allah, I'm doing this sincerely for you. I'm moving to a new city. Of course, circumstances happen, but I'm moving to this new place for your sake at the end of the day, that there will be some khair that I will be able to do for your sake. And you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens that door. So you're saying that allow me to enter truthfully and allow me to come out of it truthfully. And it goes for anything, when you enter your home, when you are entering a new day, when you enter a new month. You want to be truthful. But sometimes you may fall into a point where you may not be as honest. And then that truthfulness will come with وَجَعَلْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا, and grant me a supporting authority from you. And what that means is, give me that help, that supporting authority, someone that you're looking for assistance, because naturally, when you're entering something new and when you're leaving something that you're so used to, you feel alone. And not everyone is going to understand what you're dealing with. They may have faced a similar situation. They may have gone through some sort of similar experience that, oh yeah, I remember when I went through that as well. But they don't know exactly to the T what you're dealing with. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. So you are asking Allah, Allah, give me that supporting authority from you. That whoever is going to help me through the situation, that supporter, allow that be someone that you have brought into my life that will help me through this stage by stage. So you're taking the means as well, but you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day. So this is Surah Al-Isra, ayah number 80. The next dua that I want to share, subhanallah. So in today's session, we're basically going through a few more duas that mention Rabb. And I want you, again, keep in mind of all the definitions that we discussed as we're going through these du'as. وَالَّذِينَ, this is Surah Al-Furqan, ayah number 74, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. What name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being used here? Rabb. Rabbana hablana. Ya Rabb, bless us with the pious spouses. Again, Rabb meaning, oh Allah, my nurturer, my nourisher, my reformer. And what also this dua, if you think about it, Rabbana hablana min azwajina, it also indirectly tells us our spouses are going to nurture us. Our spouses are going to basically push us to the extent that we're going to grow from that. And will growth come in the moments where you're getting along and everything is going well? No. The growth is going to come when the disagreement is there and you're discussing and how you go about that. The growth is going to come that when a difficulty takes place in both your lives, and it's going to shake up where it's like, okay, we have to make a decision. What are we going to do now in our life? That is where growth is going to come. Because again, what happens in your life will affect your spouse's life too. Now you are min azwaj, a pair. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, oh my Rabb, the nurturer, I know my spouse is going to nurture me. I know my husband, whoever it is, my future husband or my husband currently, he's going to nurture me. And just like our spouses are nurturing us, are we not nurturing our spouses? We cannot ever say, I'm good. I don't have any faults. We have our own weaknesses that we're testing them. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to realize that no, truly we are nurturing our spouses too. And that's not an excuse for us to not work on ourselves. We have to improve ourselves as well. So you're asking Allah, Ya Allah, grant me a spouse and dhurriya, not walidain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wisdom, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just saying, oh Allah, grant me a spouse and children. Allah wants us to think far ahead. That we're talking about offspring. We're talking about generations to come who will be qurrata a'yun. That means that the generations to come, there will be ups and downs. They will also go through nurturing. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow that nurturing to be in a manner that will then become the qurrata a'yun, the coolness of our hearts. Right? The coolness, qurrata a'yun, essentially means coolness of the eyes, but what we're talking about is that where it's like the joy in our hearts in itself. And make us وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, and make them the models for the righteous, the muttaqeen, the ones that have taqwa, imama, the ones that are right at the forefront. This dua, subhanallah, is a dua that you want to make whether you are about to get married, whether you are searching for someone, whether you are married. It doesn't matter what stage in life you're in, but regardless, you want to go ahead and make this dua because of the fact that you're asking Allah that whoever's going to come, I don't know in what stage of my life, whether it be now, whether it be 5 years from now, whether it be when I'm in my 30s or 40s maybe, but whoever I am to be married to, allow that person to nurture me in a way through you, which is now the coolness of my eyes. That I don't feel this burden. I don't feel this heaviness. I don't feel degraded or low about myself. Instead, I know that no, I'm going through this nurturing to help me. And not just only help me, help us, but also to help our offsprings so that it passes on. You know, when we always talk about that, oh, how do we get that healthy marriage? The healthy marriage is not a marriage where there are no problems at all. The healthy marriage is this. This is what the healthy marriage looks like, where you're asking Allah for that spouse that will be the coolness of your eyes and also your offsprings in itself. So I'm gonna, because due to time, I know we have Salah in about 3 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of give you this ayah, but I'm not gonna go into detail about it, but it's a reflection opportunity, inshallah, for you to go ahead and reflect on Surah Al-Qasas, ayah number 24, a dua that Prophet Musa alayhi salam made after he accidentally killed someone and then ran away to the city of Madian. And then he asked Allah, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilay min khayrin faqir. And this was when, right after this, the doors opened for him in terms of marriage, in terms of the rizq. That my Rabb, I am in desperate need of whatever rizq, whatever you give me, whatever provision that you have in store for me, I am in need of that. He admitted and he acknowledged that he is faqir. So that is what we need to do as well. So when you know your Rabb, when you know your nurturer, your reformer, again, this is repetition, right? But when you know that, what is the impact? The impact and the fruits of believing in a Rabb is that you start to live a life full of contentment. You are pleased with Allah. You are pleased with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you're pleased with Allah, you're flexible. You know something's going to happen. It's going to take place, but you're flexible. And so that sweetness is, the sweetness of your iman is this dua that we recite. رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ نَبِيًّا. This is the hilawat al-iman. This is the hilwa. Right? When you say that, you're saying the sweetness of your iman in itself. And why? Because we say, Alhamdulillah, Rabb al-Alameen. Every day we say this. More than 15 times a day we say this. So with that, inshallah, we have done a full recap of the name of Allah, Ar-Rabb. And inshallah, next week we're going to go into a new name of Allah that we're going to take some time, which is Al-Qadir, Al-Qadir, Al-Muqtadir. The all-able, the all-capable. So there's actually 3 names of Allah, but we're combining it together. And this is what we'll start from next week, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to truly allow us to see the wisdom behind every trial, every struggle, every test. And even when we don't see it, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to really bring our hearts closer to Him through that trial. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to always constantly surround ourselves in understanding the names of Allah and implementing it in our lives. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us because He is truly Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Jazakallahu khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu.